My name is Father Kyle White, and I am a priest of Jesus Christ. I've been a priest for 3 years. I happen to be the pastor right here at St. Leo Catholic Church in Upper Lafayette, and I'm also the chaplain of Turling's Catholic High School right down the street. I had a great life growing up. I'm an only child, but I had a lot of cousins. I actually grew up right here in Upper Lafayette. Went to school at St. Leo Seton and then high school at Turling's Catholic High School, the place where I'm chaplain now, so that's pretty cool to be back home. Played sports growing up, all the normal sports, soccer and baseball, but soccer was really my main sport. Loved playing that and had a lot of good memories, and it was very formative for me growing up. Unfortunately, my parents divorced whenever I was 8 years old. And as an only child, that was challenging, especially at that age. That's an impressionable year. But the good news is that my parents are both so wonderful. I knew that they loved me. I never doubted that, even through the divorce and even through its challenges. And so, God really provided, even in the challenges of that time in my life. But overall, man, I've just been so blessed that I've been shaped and formed in so many ways that have brought me to this point today. Let's see, I first felt called to the priesthood. I probably felt some inklings in high school, but just never really, I was definitely in a state of denial. I was afraid of the idea of priesthood. I definitely didn't want to be called to priesthood in the beginning. And, in fact, growing up, I was always the kid that dreamed of being a husband and a father. So much so, even when I was really young, my mom tells me a story. I mean, I might have been maybe 3 or 4 years old. I mean, still young enough to basically have my parents bathe me. And but I remember, or I don't remember this, but my mom tells me the story that apparently I was stressed out one day, and I turned to her and I said, "Mom, you're already married, and so is Aunt Carolyn, so who am I going to marry?" And I was already concerned about who my future wife would be at such a young age. So, but that was just kind of part of me. I definitely saw that in my future. I always wanted to be a husband and a father. And I actually had a serious girlfriend in high school, a high school sweetheart, who actually was kind of a catalyst in getting me especially involved in my faith. And so I'm very grateful to her for bringing me to that point. And we thought we were going to get married. Sure enough, that it didn't work out. We ended up breaking up soon after graduation. But I actually had another serious girlfriend in college, and same thing. We were very seriously dating and talking about marriage. That was our intention, and about we both had about one more year left of college, and our dream together was that we would both become missionaries. And as missionaries, be able to give our whole life to God, but to do that together, to be a missionary family and to spread the gospel and to just live that adventure for the Lord. But turns out that wasn't God's will or His plan. I think the first time I seriously started getting an inkling to the priesthood was during my college years, especially during that time of dating my serious college girlfriend. And I, of course, never told her that because, again, I was still afraid of that inkling. I really didn't want it. I was in denial. I tried to convince myself that I wasn't having those inklings towards priesthood. But really, the desire was fostered mostly just by falling in love with the Lord. And in my college years, I was really blessed to get involved with the Catholic Student Center on campus. I went to UL, University of Louisiana in Lafayette, and they have such an amazing student center that really impacted my life in truly life-changing ways. I found a community there, a community of people that were striving to be good Christians, that were striving for holiness. They were striving to know the Lord deeper and to live more fully with Him. I learned how to pray while I was over there. I made friendships that last a lifetime, and And it's really in those moments in the adoration chapel and praying also in the church that my heart would be softened to hear the Lord's voice. And slowly but surely this desire for priesthood kind of manifested itself. And I was usually afraid of it and usually try to deny myself or deny the fact that I was feeling those desires. But it happened one day, again, dating that girlfriend of mine that about a year into the relationship. And we were talking about marriage. We were both a year out from graduating, and I actually ended up staffing a retreat. It was a youth retreat, and she was going to staff it as well, but something came up. I think it was a bachelorette party for one of her friends, and she wasn't actually able to join us. But the opportunity that weekend, this was really the first time really since we started dating that I spent a whole 24-hour period without talking to her, because she was on a bachelorette trip and I was at the youth retreat. And not only was I separated from her, I was also immersed in an environment of other people that were praying and excited about the Lord and talking about their faith. And so I was just very much in a spiritually healthy environment. And there were actually seminarians there as well, and priests that were at this retreat. And I noticed that I just had this desire for what they had. It was a mysterious desire. I almost would say that it was jealousy. Like I almost was jealous of their life. And it was very odd to me, and you know, just one thing after another, the Lord it almost felt like the talks or different conversations or different signs would just come one after another. And they just kept pounding me right in the heart. Basically, just the Lord being loud and clear, opening my heart to the desire for priesthood. And finally, there was this moment towards the end of the retreat where I was just overwhelmed with God's love for me, and overwhelmed with this clarity that He was calling me to this life, that He was inviting me to be His priest. And the joy and the freedom and even the relief of just having so much clarity and such a strong desire for this was really just a beautiful moment of surrender. So I had this moment where I really had to separate myself from the rest of the retreat, and I actually ended up just surrendering to the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, if you're calling me, I'm ready. And I actually texted Father Sibley, the priest on the college campus at that time, and I told him I'm ready. We had talked about this prior, and he knew that I was kind of wrestling, and so I finally surrendered, and that did mean that I had to go home and break up with my girlfriend, who I genuinely was in love with, and so it was a very odd experience because nothing bad was happening in our relationship. And I still loved her, but I still had to let go because the Lord was inviting me to something else. And she, of course, was completely shocked when I got home, completely caught off guard because I was too afraid to ever tell her that I was wrestling with these desires and these thoughts. So it wasn't easy. It was definitely a difficult experience to have to go through that with her and to let her go. But praise be to God that she too had a deep prayer life, and she knew the Lord very well. She also was supported with a lot of good friends. And so after the initial shock and grief was experienced, she was able to soon get to a place of support and also a place of excitement for this vocation. And as the story goes, now many years later, we are still friends. In fact, she ended up marrying one of my best friends from high school, which is kind of cool because now there's a very healthy boundary in place. You know, I can still visit my best friend from high school, and she happens to be his wife. So we're able to kind of all three still have a very good and holy friendship, even given the past. So my mom actually saw this in me way before I did. When I was in high school, my mom, I think, started to notice these inklings. And, because I'm an only child, and as I mentioned, my parents divorced when I was at a young age, um, my mom was very uneasy about the possibility of not having grandchildren. My mom loves kids. She's so good with kids. In fact, she's a teacher to young kids, and she just looked forward to the day of having grandchildren. And so, just the thought of not having those grandchildren was very difficult for her. So even as early as high school, she would every now and then pull me aside and say, "Kyle, you know that I love you, and you know that I'll support anything you want to do in your life, but please promise me that you will never become a priest." And so we laugh about this now, but she was really struggling with this idea. And I, of course, would react like, "Whoa, Mom, like, where's this coming from? Of course I'm not going to become a priest. Like, I would never want to do that." And anyway, but nonetheless, she would bring it up from time to time because she saw it in me. Well, the good news is that by the time that I was in college, and these desires for priesthood started to become a little bit more real to me, she had made her own journey of acceptance with it, and she actually approached me. In fact, maybe as little as a month before I really surrendered to the Lord, and she said, "Okay, Kyle, I know that we've talked about this before, but if you decide to become a priest, I want you to know that I support you." And it was really freeing to receive that from my mom. And I mean, oddly enough, I was still at this moment dating my girlfriend, who I was very serious about dating, and we were talking about marriage, and my reaction was, "Well, Mom, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get married. I mean, why would you even bring that up right now?" But nonetheless, her intuition has always been really good, and she said, "I know, I just want you to know that I support you." So it was a very freeing thing for me to receive her permission and her support at a time when I needed it, because really about a month later is when I finally had that moment of surrender. My dad, on the other hand, never saw it, and I never told him about it. And so whenever I did surrender to embracing this vocation, I remember calling him, and he was 100% shocked. I mean, just completely shocked. Did not even imagine this coming. It just came way out of left field for him. And my dad also was not Catholic, so this was a little bit more difficult for him to accept and understand. So I remember, that phone call was a tough one, because there was just basically every negative emotion from his perspective. He went through shock, to confusion, to anger, to disappointment, to sadness. I mean, he covered it all in one conversation, and because it was just a lot to take in. And he too was looking forward to grandchildren, and he just couldn't understand, especially as a non-Catholic, why anybody these days would want to live such a life. So, we got through that conversation, and very patiently, I just gave that to the Lord, and I still loved my dad, and I knew that he loved me, but it was just a difficult thing to grapple with. And so through the years, I would just offer up, my dad to the Lord of that he would, just kind of come to a deeper understanding of what this life is all about. And he, of course, after that conversation, he very soon got to the point of saying, "Listen, I don't understand this, but I do support you. I do love you. I don't understand it, but I want you to know that I love you." So again, I was grateful to have that. But again, praise be to God that a couple years into my studies, I was about 2 years away from priesthood. My dad and my stepmom and my half sister were visiting, and I remember we were out to eat one night, and they're kind of looking at each other and kind of whispering, and I kind of look at him and I say, "Well, what's going on?" And they're all saying to each other, "No, you tell him. No, you tell him." And so finally, my half sister says, okay, well, I'll tell him. And she smiles with a big beaming face and she says, Bubba Kyle, we're going to become Catholic. And she was like 10 years old at the time. And it was just a really beautiful moment of, oh my goodness. I was not expecting them to say such an awesome thing. But yeah, sure enough, that Easter, all three of them became Catholic, and I was actually their sponsor for the process. So, and then of course, from that moment, full support and pride in my vocation. And so it's just beautiful because I didn't necessarily do a whole lot to bring them to that point. Like it wasn't me who convinced them about the Catholic Church or who had long conversations about the teachings of our faith, or the Lord actually brought other people into their life that really kind of guided them through that process. But I know that by my prayers, that certainly helped them get to that point, and certainly it's a joy to have the full support of both parents in this vocation at this point in my life. I was ordained in 2018, June 23rd. I was 27 when I was ordained, and I'm 30 now, so that was 3 years ago. It's such a joy to be back at Turlings. Growing up, I always kind of wanted to be a teacher. Of course, neither of my parents liked that idea either. It's funny, there were two things they didn't want me to be. Not a priest, not a teacher. But and mainly because my parents, understood the financial challenges of a teacher's salary, especially if that would be, the husband and the father as the teacher. And so, they wanted me to, as many parents do, they want me to be successful. But anyway, I say all that because that desire to teach and to mentor students as they grow was something that was always there. And certainly as an alumni of Turlings, it's particularly special to go back to that school. And although I'm not an official teacher, I am kind of in that role, just being present on campus as a chaplain and being able to kind of walk with students and even faculty and parents too, and alumni. So it's a really unique role, but it's so beautiful to be really back at home. It kind of feels like a perpetual homecoming, just to be right there, serving the Lord in that capacity. Favorite thing about being a priest is being a father. I mentioned earlier, I always longed to be a husband and a father. I knew that there was a deep desire within me to be a dad. And the Lord has blessed that desire, although it doesn't look like your traditional experience of fatherhood. It's still, in a very real way, an experience of fatherhood, but just with a larger flock, with a larger amount of spiritual children. So my favorite part about being a priest is being able to enter into very deep relationships with a lot of different people of all ages. As a priest, you're kind of put in a unique position. People will often confide in you or entrust things to you that sometimes they haven't entrusted to anyone else before. And so you deal a lot with sensitive information with others. But because of that, you also have the opportunity to walk with them and to watch them grow and to watch them persevere through challenges. And you get to celebrate with them when they experience great victories in life. But you also suffer with them whenever they go through hard times. And so just that experience of fatherhood is, really the best thing about being a priest. I think the greatest challenge is similar to the previous question on fatherhood. It is difficult to be a father of a large family because you have so many different children, spiritual children, with different perspectives and different experiences and different needs. And sometimes there is they don't quite understand the life that you live, and they don't quite understand that there are other children that I am loving. And so also too, I have a particular vantage point of knowing certain things about different people because of what they've entrusted to me. But because it's sensitive information, I'm not really able to share that with others. And so sometimes you have to navigate some challenging social dynamics of knowing information but not being able to share that out of respect for those that have confided in you. So that can be a challenge at times, just like balancing all the different relationships that come in being a priest. But the biggest reward is, in the same token, all of those relationships. There, you really get a good grasp of what love looks like. You receive a lot of love as a priest, and a lot of affirmation and appreciation from a lot of your spiritual children. But at the same time, you get a chance to give that love to others, and so it's just a great reward to see your children grow. It's a great reward to experience the exchange of love in the tangible realities of each day. 20 years from now, I hope that I am wherever God wants me. I just would have never imagined or planned to be where I am today. And yet, I can honestly say that right now, in this season of my life, I think I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I know that there's ups and downs of life, but I'm just in a really good spot right now. And I love where I'm at. I love this parish. I love the school that I'm involved with. And I would have never gotten here if the Lord would not have brought me here. I would have never planned to achieve all that it takes to get here. Instead, the Lord just very generously laid out a path for me and brought me right where He wants me. So 20 years from now, I have no idea. Maybe I'll be right here, who knows? Or maybe at a different parish. I don't know, but as long as it's the Lord's will, I know that it's going to be worthwhile, it's going to be meaningful. I know that I'll be in a good spot. Be not afraid. That's my message for those that are wondering how to follow God's will. I would say be not afraid. So often fear holds us back from our fullest potential, and so often fear becomes a barrier in our relationship with God. One of my favorite saints is Pope John Paul II, and he was so inspiring in so many ways. He was very good with people. He was athletic. He was really smart. He did a lot of good for the church. He was a witness of hope in a time of darkness, and the list goes on. But his one of his fundamental messages that he would repeatedly bring to the world is the same message that Jesus often brought through Scripture, and that's be not afraid. Because sometimes love makes demands, and sometimes love requires sacrifice, and sometimes life requires difficult moments, and sometimes faith is dark. But with all that, if we are operating out of fear, we'll never make it. But as St. John tells us, love casts out all fear. And if we live with love, we have nothing to be afraid of. And if we are afraid of what the future might hold or what God might ask of us, it's only love that's going to give us the courage to move forward. And so if you think that God might be calling you to priesthood or religious life, I would say be not afraid. Step out into the deep, lower your nets for a catch, and see what God might do with it. You gonna stand there?
I need to be here, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Just tell somebody
I'm
else what to
sorry,
do.
I just cannot
No,
speak to
no, don't
nobody.
worry.
It's not going to be
No,
real.
no, just, I'm just like, okay, one more time. Are you ready? Take
All
a deep
right, I'm
breath.
ready.